Boldwood presents The Memory of You, written by Samantha Tonge and read by Claire Story. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Alex put in her wireless earphones and pressed play on a rap album her most recent not-boyfriend had recommended. She took the lift down to reception and nodded at the doorman in his top hat and frock coat, unaware that tonight would be her last sleep in the glass tower apartment. Late May sunshine air-kissed her face as a nearby quarrel of sparrows fought over a chunk of focaccia from Bernardo's next door. Perhaps she'd pop in later for a celebratory nightcap. In time to the rap, she strutted past a wall of floral street art and left Great Northern Square. The Gothic John Rylands Library loomed into view, dominating Deansgate's skyline. Alex's phone vibrated. She took it out of her blazer pocket and turned down the music. Standing to one side of the pavement, next to a street cleaner and his luminous yellow trolley, she read the short text. "Everything all right, Flower?" asked the cleaner as he cast her an appreciative glance. Her handbag fell to the ground, and the contents skidded near to a street drain. He collected up the scattered belongings. Eyes still on the screen, she snatched back her bag and walked off, bristling as other pedestrians stared. "My pleasure, no need to thank me," the street cleaner hollered. Heat filled Alex's face. It had been good of him to help her. At the top of broad and bustling Market Street, she reached Piccadilly Gardens. The text must have been a joke. Yes, that was it. On automatic, she followed commuters marching up to the station, one behind the other, like a queue of inmates heading for yard time. A taxi's horn told her off as she crossed another road without looking. Her feet loped over an arched metal bridge and down the other side. The Manchester Canal appeared, along with a flock of paddling ducks that overtook moored narrowboats in triangle formation. Alex passed a rainbow-painted oblong planter, drawn on further by fairy lights tied between trees and lampposts. Customers spilled out of a bookshop, with sale posters and multicoloured banners outside. At 5 o'clock sharp, she stopped outside the bar, dance music pulsating inside. Clouds of fruity vape smoke wafted over from outside tables. She took out her earphones and went in, but ever-punctual Miranda wasn't there. Alex gripped the back of a chair. The text had been serious. Her agent really wasn't turning up. Having bumped into a young man wearing a studded neck collar and a tartan kilt, she then headed straight for the bar. As she rifled in her handbag, a woman with pale skin, wearing a baggy, taupe sweatshirt and jogging trousers, came in. Alex's search became frantic. A pin in her hair came loose and strands tumbled down one side of her head as she rummaged in her bag. "Let me pay for your drink," said the other woman gently. "I've lost my purse," snapped Alex, and she shook her head. There were more important things than buying wine or the cash or bank card. She cared about finding the old photo of her mum, not that anyone else needed to know that. The woman stepped back and her chin trembled. "I was only trying to help." "My terrier's got better manners than you," said the man in the kilt. He glared at Alex. "Kindness doesn't cost anything." Alex froze. As the back of his head disappeared into the melee of customers, her face contorted. Miranda's text message, the cleaner's shouts, being rude to this poor woman. But she wouldn't cry. Alex was stronger than that. She rubbed her cheeks with the back of her hand and went to apologize. However, the woman's fists curled into balls, and a very small sob escaped from her chest. Shoulder to shoulder, the two women stood, eyes and noses streaming. Alex focused on the tiled floor, willing it to open up and swallow them. "Are you okay?" Alex muttered. "I will be," the woman sniffed. "It doesn't take much to set me off these days." "Nothing to see here, folks," the bar manager called to a group of captivated drinkers. She tightened the neon bobble around her greying dreadlocks, shook her head, poured 2 large glasses of wine and pushed them across the counter. "On the house." The other woman paused. But Alex spontaneously picked up both drinks and the bar manager's offer of a bag of crisps as well. They found a table in the corner, and after Alex brushed it down with her hand, they sat on a black velvet couch in the shape of a pair of lips. The woman passed Alex a tissue, collapsed against the couch's back, and blew her own nose loudly. Alex dabbed her eyes and thought back to one frosty morning, not long before her 40th birthday, when she'd resisted crying in public. Black absorbed heat. Perhaps it also absorbed feelings, because standing next to the coffin, in her designer charcoal dress, Alex hadn't felt a thing. Not until she'd got home from the funeral, closed the door, and changed into her pyjamas. "I'm Hope, Alex. You should ring your bank, cancel your cards. Would you mind looking up Santander's contact number while I sort out my face?" Alex pushed her phone over, then took out her compact and powdered her cheeks. "I've had 6 phone calls from my daughter Leah over the weekend and 4 texts so far today," Hope mumbled, after Alex ended the call to her bank. Alex scrolled down her phone. "The last one talked about us eating wasp crackers." "I got a text too," said Alex. You mean wasabi?" "No. For the last 3 months she's been on at me to go travelling with her before her final year at university. She's saved for a couple of years, worked in the student bar and wants to go. For almost 5 weeks, leaving tomorrow and coming back on the 1st of July. Went along with it in the beginning, got the jabs, bought myself a huge backpack, agreed that we'd get a flight from Manchester and meet at the airport, but she's in Birmingham. But as the trip has neared, I've blocked it out. I can't face the lack of day-to-day planning. I'm used to my routines. As for the tropical weather and insects I might be expected to eat, Hope's talking gathered speed. And I've got a job. I can't just leave. A life. Well, sort of. It's not the best. Her voice wavered. I'm in a rut, no doubt about it. Alex studied Hope's tired face, the round cheeks, the laughter lines, the unapologetic blemishes and shadows. A face that didn't lie. I just finished my shift and started walking. Found myself here in the village. Hope took a large mouthful of wine. Sorry, rambling, but it's such a relief to let it all out, and my text was regarding a business meeting that got cancelled, said Alex. Miranda, my agent, was due to travel up from London. She paused and took a sip of her drink. She'd developed a habit over the last few years of butting in, as if her news was more important than anyone else's. Recently she'd become aware of this and was trying to stop herself. Agent? You do look familiar. What shows have you been? Tears forgotten. Alex sat more upright and pulled a signed photo out of her bag. She'd made sure the writing was illegible like the autographs of big stars. She thrust it upon Hope. You're welcome. A couple at a nearby table giggled. Alex picked up the laminated bar menu, telling herself they weren't laughing at her. Miranda's new girlfriend grew up in the northwest and told her the bars here were the highlight of Manchester. Misguided advice, the food in Spinningfields is far superior. She tossed the menu aside. The meeting here was cancelled hours ago, but Miranda's email must have bounced back and I didn't get it. She just texted because I hadn't replied. Alex picked up a single crisp and chewed it slowly. Apparently my work has lost its passion, she said in a smaller voice. She may as well have called me a has-been. Hope's eyes crinkled in a kindly manner. If it's any consolation, this last year or two, I've asked myself how I've ended up in my mid-40s in a one-bed flat above a cafe. Our kid insists I go abroad with her, that it'll do me good. She glanced down at her top and loose bottoms. Thing is, I can't be bothered with anything much these days. It's all too much effort, certainly a trip like this. There's no point me harking back to the more courageous woman I used to be. The cost of living and energy crisis have stolen her away. Miranda suggested I take a break as well from my career, but my job... Alex placed her palm on her chest for emphasis. I'm an existentialist. This calling is who I am. Alex knew it sounded pretentious, but felt this was true. She thought, therefore she wrote. It meant everything to her. I was gutted when I lost my last job. because it put a roof over my head and food on the table. The bills piled up. I ended up homeless and had to sleep on my daughter's sofa in her student house for a while. Tell me about it, said Alex with a dismissive wave. I've had tough times too. What with the rejection emails and petty reviews. Hope's brow furrowed like someone who'd listened to a joke but hadn't got the punchline. Alex picked up another crisp, but threw it back. You're not supposed to lose success after years of hard work. You're not supposed to have reached my age without finding much success at all. They sat on the couch, each lost in their own thoughts. An outburst of quacks flew through an open window. Alex's mum had loved birds and passed on many snippets about bird life, like how ducks could close down half their brain and sleep with one eye open to keep themselves safe from predators. Alex wished she could close down half her brain, the part that saw everything in black and white, that told her if she wasn't number one, she'd 100% failed. That if she didn't strive to keep herself young, the future would be bleaker than a dystopian novel. The thud of a tray caught her attention. The bar manager turned her head from Alex to Hope and pursed her lips. "Let me give you both a word of advice," she said. "It's—" A clatter came from the bar. The bar manager tutted and hurried away. Alex shook her head. "I'm sick of people like her, like Miranda, acting as if they know best about my life." Alex was 43, at the peak of her second career. Well, she had been until recently. That bar manager wouldn't know anything about losing face on the public stage. Hope's phone pinged. She picked it up and cautiously opened a text. Without asking permission, Alex took the phone and read the message out aloud. "Mum, please ring me. All your text said yesterday was see you on Tuesday. We're supposed to have discussed how much currency to take with us. What's going on? Last-minute nerves? Well, I've checked us both in online. You wouldn't want your daughter travelling across an unfamiliar continent all alone now, would you?" "That's emotional blackmail," protested Hope. "Nicely done," said Alex approvingly. "I've never travelled, unless you include all-inclusive holidays to resorts where everyone speaks English and eats eggs and bacon. What about my boss, Tom? I've not even told him about this holiday. I've kidded myself it's not going to happen. He'd find it hard to replace me that quickly. Not that I'd want him to. I'd need that job when I returned." Hope took back her phone and read the text again. "But if I don't go, my daughter will never speak to me again, and I'll feel like I've let her down. I should have spoken to her as soon as doubts appeared. You don't fancy working in a cafe on my behalf until the beginning of July, do you?" she asked Alex in a wry tone. "I live in. That means as much coffee and cake as you want and no commute to work." Alex cocked her head. Right at this minute, Hope's life sounded perfect. With an uncomplicated job, a child who clearly loved her, flights booked to somewhere sunny. But then people tended to think an author's life was enviable, with parties and high rankings. Often it was. Sometimes it wasn't. "Only joking," added Hope quickly. "As if I'm flying to the other side of the world. As if someone like you would consider I might surprise you. Tell me about some of the things in your life that make you happy." "Well, that's easy. Apart from my wonderful daughter, books and more books." Alex leant forward. "Mum taught me to read before I started school," Hope continued. "Stories have been my best friends throughout the most difficult times. Comedies when I'm down, thrillers when my life makes no sense, uplifting fiction when I want to feel as if there could be a bright future ahead. Frederick Backman, Marion Keyes, Matt Haig, Sophie Kinsella, and many lesser-known authors, writers of young adult fiction too." "A good book can turn a bad day around," agreed Alex. "Especially 50 Shades." Hope grinned, and the two women chatted more, comparing favourite novels. "My colleagues in the cafe make me happy too. They are pretty special. Wish I could say the same." Alex pulled a face and Hope laughed. "To be fair, my editor was encouraging. It's scary putting a debut out there, but she gave me reassurance. Even if all the changes she wanted making were challenging, the criticism had been hard to take after a difficult couple of years. Alex shrugged. Imagine you must be special too to fit in with those colleagues. Your daughter clearly thinks you are, to want to travel with her mum. Alex's phone pinged again. An email from her mortgage provider. Her heart raced. She'd been ignoring their messages lately. "Oh, you've really cheered me up. Thank you, Petal," said Hope. A warmth swept through Alex's chest that she hadn't experienced for a long time. Mum used to call her Petal. What with that and their mutual obsession with books, it was almost as if fate had brought her and Hope together. "It's extreme, granted, but let's say we don't dismiss your suggestion outright. Hypothetically, what would either of us have to lose?" asked Alex. Hope eyed Alex up and down. "Tom pays fair wages, but nothing like you'd be used to. Any earnings are welcome, as I haven't got a new book coming out and loyal fans will have already bought my backlist." Alex tried to sound upbeat, but her royalty payments kept getting smaller and smaller and were a far cry from the amounts that, at the beginning of her career, had made her mortgage very affordable. If she lost her home, Alex had nothing. "You're an author. Wow, you should have said." "Alex Butler, pleased to meet you," Alex said, and she sat a little bit taller. She was still a best-selling writer of escapist, high-gloss, racy romance, after all. "Right, of course I recognise you now," said Hope, and her hand caught her own drink. She jumped up to avoid wine spilling down her trousers. Cheeks flushed, Hope sat down again, dabbing the table with a napkin. "I loved reading. Glamourpuss, wasn't that your debut? It was ace, really gripping." Alex warmed to Hope even more. "Thank you. I was so excited to sign a 3-book contract with my publisher. I assumed today's meeting was to discuss the next contract. Miranda only found out today that they don't like the 3 chapters I submitted for the next story, and—" Alex didn't do negatives, not about her career, not in front of other people. Her social platforms were about maintaining a flourishing image. But then this was real life. She wouldn't lose followers or likes by talking in this room, and she might not ever see this Hope again. They don't see their future with me. They're letting me go. Say they're sure my wonderful work will find a new home." She gave a sigh. "My new project tips into cli-fi, that is, climate change fiction," said Hope. "Yes," said Alex, surprised Hope knew about it. "I set my story at a fracking company, bringing in a subplot of corruption and backhanders. Your debut's Tabitha Stallion was such a brilliant character," said Hope. "Go-getting, no nonsense. I wanted to be her." A wave of nostalgia swept over Alex, and she shivered at the memory of when her first book came out 3 years ago. It had been a great way to celebrate her 40th birthday. It had topped the charts, as did the next book that also won an award. She cut out all the reviews in magazines and newspapers and kept them in a special folder. Once she'd taken them to the crematorium and read them out to her mum's ashes, which she'd scattered in the gardens there. But then the 3rd novel had bombed. Everything went downhill when I got a review from the Eternal Springs blog. Hope gave her a quizzical look. "It's one of the most successful book blogs out there. Has thousands of followers who all rush there to get the lowdown on any new release. It had given my first 2 books great ratings, but out of nowhere slammed the 3rd, called it saccharine without the heart of my earlier novels. I'm convinced that swayed my readership." Hope smiled at the barman as he brought her a new glass of wine. Immediately she knocked half back. "Surely one blog can't wield that much power. You think? Negative words from a blogger might sting, but you want to try being on the end of a loan shark's rant. I was desperate a couple of years ago, trying to hold on to my own home." A loan shark did sound frightening, and Alex's heart pounded again at the thought of her own money troubles. She shot Hope a sympathetic glance. "A fridge full of champagne is no use if you've nothing to celebrate. Miranda warned me a while back my publisher may not want to re-sign me. That the cost of living crisis is affecting publishers too, with falls in sales and rises in production costs. That's when she suggested a career break, to find my mojo again, but I didn't believe her warning. My editor has always been so enthusiastic. Alex took a moment. Miranda said if I'm set on carrying on writing, I need to reignite my passion. She wants at least the first 3 chapters of the Cli-Fi story rewritten and sparkling by 1st of July, the day she gets back from Tuscany. It's the submission window deadline for what she's calling my last chance. There's a new publisher that has been inundated with queries from authors and is about to close its submission window temporarily. Miranda is friends with the commissioning editor, who she reckons would take a look as a favour, even though I haven't written the whole thing yet. Otherwise, it's going to be months of waiting until the manuscript is written before anyone else will read it, and financially that's not feasible. If I miss this opportunity... Alex ran one finger horizontally across her neck. Perhaps it's fate. You and I would have the same end date. You getting back from a worldwide trip, me finding my va-va-voom again, here in Manchester away from my apartment in a different living space to get my creativity back on track. Alex needed a change, a new mindset. Except yours isn't an end date, it's a deadline. Alex threw her phone on the table, took off her blazer and leant back on the couch. I've met publisher demands for the last 3 years, and at the start I felt part of a team, all of us equals, and... Her voice broke, but didn't mend itself properly, and the next words came out scratchy. I never used to doubt myself. Now I wake up in the middle of the night and dissect the next day's writing, the plot twists, characters' quirks, changing my mind countless times, voices in my head throwing around quotes from snarky bloggers on Amazon and Goodreads. I've even had a couple of nights of panic sweats. I can't carry on like this. There, she'd said it. 3 o'clock in the morning. That's always the time for me, said Hope. I'll dissect arguments I've had with Leah's dad or old classmates in the 90s. I'll go over my day in the cafe, worried I've upset a customer or member of staff. I don't recognise the woman I've become. Hope ran a finger over a stain on her sweatshirt. That's modern living for you. I never asked for much, brought Leah up on my own, ran my own business at the same time. We didn't have much, but it was enough. It made me feel good about myself. That feels like a lifetime ago now. I've lots to be grateful for, I know, but it's become increasingly difficult to stay positive. Alex related. She could hardly bear admitting it to herself, but she might need the new source of income, however low, that this cafe could provide. Because if the new book didn't sell well, or didn't even get signed, her savings had gone. Her bills were rising. Getting on the property ladder by herself wasn't the dream she'd imagined when she'd signed her publishing deal. Every morning Alex would consult the mirror, just about recognise the old her peering out from behind the Botox she'd started to have, despite being only 43, thinking it would make her feel better. But deep in the night, when your soul was the mirror, she couldn't find that independent daughter whose mum used to call her so capable, couldn't find that person who'd grasped a new life after her divorce and didn't fear the future. Sorry I was rude to you earlier. I haven't much control over what comes out of my mouth these days. Same, said Hope. Were you serious about me having your job while you're away and moving into your flat? It's wild, but, well, she smiled. Mum did always tease me for not having a single spontaneous bone in my body. What? Of course not, it's tiny. Don't get me wrong, I've made my flat cosy and the front side looks over a bustling square. It's quite comfortable, but also you living there would mean I had to go travelling, and there's no way I'm... It sounded like just what Alex needed, and the opposite of her flashy tower apartment. Alex had celebrated until the early hours the day she'd signed the mortgage agreement. However, since her career had stumbled and her earnings had dropped, the place had felt more and more like a trap. I need to get away from my 4 walls, From my office, the computer screen, Alex said, not mentioning how 5 weeks without using electricity there, and perhaps scoring free meals in someone else's home, would help her scrape together enough to make a mortgage payment. She'd defaulted on the last 2, counting on the advance from the new contract that had fallen through. Alex felt as if she was going to be sick just thinking about the financial difficulties she was facing. 5 weeks living rent-free in Hope's flat was a lifeline. Time to get her head straight. A way-out idea? Yes. But what was the alternative? Sitting in her apartment each day, lacking inspiration, watching the days pass until the July deadline arrived, without Alex having created the sparkling chapters Miranda wanted. And from a practical point of view, one of the main characters in her Cli-Fi story was working undercover in the fracking company's fancy staff coffee shop as a barista. Working in Hope's cafe would give her an authentic insight into the job. What a refreshing change! Along with the simplicity of serving drinks and snacks away from complicated publishing types, she said in a voice braver than she felt, "I need this, Hope. And you haven't got time to delay. Your flight takes off tomorrow. Your daughter is expecting you." "True." Hope wrung her hands. "I know you're right. I need a little push. Just wish I had more time to think about it. So, are we on?" "I'm not sure. I'll need to speak to my boss and the place where I work. There's something you don't know." "Let's meet in Selfridge's coffee shop tomorrow morning, with our bags packed. You can still change your mind. We can talk it through again. But if you're happy, then it will simply be a matter of you handing over your keys and getting to the airport." "Come on, Hope. We can do this." Alex looked more serious. "It's a big thing letting someone into your home, I know that. And I promise to look after it. It would be foolish to do otherwise, what with me being a public figure." Hope didn't say anything. "What?" prodded Alex gently. "The idea scares me, Alex, it really does," she whispered. "Trusting my life to a stranger. Going off around the world, what if I fall ill? Can't keep the pace. I'm frightened of everything these days, like travelling in rush hour or going out for drinks to crowded pubs, normal, everyday things. I lie in bed at night worrying I didn't turn off the hob or answer every notification on Facebook. I stress about climate change, world wars, that annoying ringing in my ears. I'm not me anymore. The carefree Hope has gone, that determined woman who brought up her daughter after telling her cheating, abusive partner to F off. Unused to being in the company of someone so open, who admitted their life wasn't shiny and successful, Alex took a deep breath. I get it. She'd never confided in anyone before about how, a few years ago, it was as if a kidnapper had arrived and stolen the more resilient Alex. Perhaps Hope had also suffered a bereavement, because when you lost someone close, you lost part of yourself too. Casual relationships helped because no one got close enough to see the damage and anger that she could pretend didn't trouble her. The slick Alex Butler brand gave her an identity to be proud of, and on a good day, when she didn't feel like screaming, the grounded image readers and lovers admired almost felt real. But how can a 5-week holiday make things worse? Whereas, if you don't take it, your daughter will probably ghost you. And if I don't get out of my apartment and find inspiration, all I've worked for will be nothing. Her voice caught. She hoped no one had heard it. Hope tilted her head. You honestly believe living at my place will help your career, don't you? Does that sound ridiculous? No. Perhaps it could. After all, where I work is pretty unique. Okay. Great that we agree. Thanks, Hope. Thanks for persuading me this is a viable plan. Wait, don't be so modest. All credit to you. Chapter 2. Alex strode through Selfridges and past tables of designer handbags, Prada, Gucci, Chanel, names that were friends. Alongside her large pull case, she stood on the escalator, and the San Carlo Gran Café came into view on the lower ground floor. She stepped off at the bottom and relaxed as she soaked up the familiar high-end atmosphere. An especially heady scent of perfume filled her nostrils, a recent favourite. Luxury cosmetic stands and racks of deluxe sunglasses lined the way as she headed towards the coffee shop, with its grey and white marble tables and mint-green front. A server stood behind the counter in a smart blue apron over his white shirt and black trousers, rows of champagne bottles behind him looking down on customers. Last night she'd slept through for the first time in ages. No characters came calling. She dozed off within minutes, comforted by the knowledge that the next day wouldn't begin with an empty page to fill, her body planted at her uninspiring desk. Instead, she had several weeks to take her time in a different setting and rewrite the opening to her novel so that it left the new publisher begging. In case burglars struck during her absence, this morning she'd locked away her valuables in her apartment, like her late mum's engagement ring, passport, the Dior lipstick collection. Her hand had brushed against the glass awards she'd won during the time when Miranda would hold their meetings in the Ivy. Alex used to believe you were only as good as your characterization and how much readers invested in your latest story. Bless. A clinical list of sales figures counted for much more. She'd picked up one of the awards and read her engraved name before leaving it and the others in their usual prominent position on the ornamental mantelpiece. A whirlwind of a career. That's what Miranda had called it. She'd never known an author to rise so quickly. Perhaps that's why the fall had fast-forwarded. As she checked the chair for crumbs and sat down, her phone pinged. The smell of warmed, sugary pastries felt as reassuring as a hug. An email had arrived from Miranda. Alex closed her inbox without reading it. On the table opposite, a man with short grey hair shot her a smile. Alex didn't respond. Simon had been 28 when they'd met, 5 years older than Alex, and already doing well at his software engineering career. Since he'd left, she'd only dated younger men, more interested in no-ties sex than pillow talk. Ignoring the man, he was definitely over 50, she scrolled through her Instagram feed. She should buy that new lip-plumping cream. Her stomach rumbled. 10:15. 15 minutes overdue. Surely this hope wouldn't bow out. Last-minute emergency. Couldn't find my bum bag. A large backpack clung onto Hope like a scared child, not sure of the journey ahead. She pulled it off and collapsed into a chair. The other customers went back to their drinks. Alex called over the server. He returned with another espresso and a latte for Hope. "I'm glad you came." "Nearly didn't. My boss Tom wasn't happy. But I told him you were confident that you could manage." "Of course I can." Alex stared as Hope emptied 3 sugar sachets into her coffee. "He said you'll be on a 1-week trial, and if you're not up to scratch, you'll have to take on a new person. But if that happens, I could lose my income, lose my home." Her voice wavered. "I'm still not sure I should do this." "You said yourself you were in a rut. When will you ever have another opportunity like this to be adventurous, and alongside your daughter?" Hope stared for a moment and then exhaled. "I know. That's what I've been telling myself all night. Just don't mess up." She gave Alex a hard look. So this Hope did have a backbone. "Don't worry. How difficult can it be? Slicing cake, carrying drinks on trays. You should still know that—" Alex held up her hand. What was it with so many other people, once they turned 40, needing to know the minutiae of what lay in the future? Taking on the life of a stranger reminded her of how she used to love the empty pages of a first draft, full of adventure and promise. She'd hurried out of the glass tower this morning, as if Harvey Nicks had a sale. "If you must tell me something, talk about this Tom." Alex unzipped her green leather jacket and sipped her coffee. "What's he like?" "Good with customers. He likes reading too, and gaming. His scones are second to none. You'll have to do better than that. What with me being a romantic author, use your imagination. What might a woman find attractive about him? I suppose he's got amazing brown eyes, like chocolate. Her editor used to hate clichés and would probably have run red ink through Hope's sentence. Hope checked her phone and sighed. I asked Leah to send me the itinerary, but suspect she hasn't planned further than taking off from Manchester. Where's your sense of spontaneity? All I care about is that you've washed the sheets in your flat and left me a little space in the wardrobe. Alex knocked back her coffee. Text me your address. Alex's phone pinged and she opened the message, jumping straight to the name of the street. The Northern Quarter. She hadn't imagined Hope working in such a trendy area. Alex tried to picture the cafe, perhaps a little quirky, frequented by arty types, and the owner, this Tom, wearing a vintage print shirt and chino shorts, with thick chestnut hair tied up in a man bun. See you at the beginning of July. Alex's chair scraped back. She got to her feet and grabbed her case's handle, as if it was going to open a door to the perfect oasis. However, Hope remained in her seat. Alex sat down again. Problem. You will water my plants, won't you? She asked in a small voice. I'm entrusting my home to you, Alex. It may not have gold-plated fittings or a butler on call, but it's the one place in the world where I can be you. Hope was fortunate. Increasingly, Alex's apartment had become less comfortable, with its nut-white walls, oak herringbone flooring, and every room's decor being a classic, unhomely mix of white, teal, and ivory. Its contrived moon-lifting feng shui meant a lack of cosy, cluttered nooks she could curl up into. Even her study was streamlined and orderly. Realizing how much Hope was handing over, Alex fingered a gold chain around her neck, released its clasp, and took off the glittering four-leafed clover pendant. Take this, it's my lucky charm. Wow, diamonds. Hope held it in the air. I can't possibly. What if I lose it? It must mean so much to you. Call it insurance. You get to keep it if a single one of your plants dies. Although, I warn you now, I haven't got the greenest fingers, but I'll do my best. Hope's face lit up, and she put it on straight away. Ryan had given Alex this last Christmas, told her she was the biggest bit of luck he'd ever had. She'd called things off in the new year, having developed feelings for him, and that wouldn't do. If she let anyone through the cracks, they might not like what they saw. There'd be no denying her vulnerability, and then she'd shatter completely. Wearing the charm every day had been a reminder to hold it together, to find her old pizzazz, but there wasn't as much point now. It hadn't worked. She was out of contract and almost out of time. Alex stood up again, held out her hand and pulled Hope to her feet. She gazed into those honest eyes and could tell they completely trusted that the lucky charm would work. You're happy to do this, Hope? Not sure happy is the right word, but yes. Hope lifted her chin. Let's go. I'll try not to let you down. Make sure you have a job to come back to. Okay, Alex muttered. She wrapped her arms around the shapeless hoodie and held on to Hope a second longer than intended, surprised to realize she also meant what she'd said. Alex went to go, but Hope took hold of her arm. Don't give up on your writing, Alex, she mumbled. Channel Tabitha's stallion. You can accomplish anything. Tabitha Stallion had been created out of hate for her ex-husband, a strong woman who intimidated male characters. Alex had hoped that process would be cathartic, and eventually the hurt did pass. Alex nodded at Hope, overwhelmed by a sudden urge to cry. She squeezed Hope's arm and left hurriedly. Rain threatened as Alex walked up Market Street, past buskers and open-air preachers. At the height of her success, bowled over by the popularity of her debut, with the crowded bookshop signings and large numbers of pre-orders for the next book, Alex had got carried away and considered moving to London, fantasizing that the next step would be red carpet premieres of screenplays adapted from her stories. However, as her initial success faded, Alex valued Manchester, a place that had no expectations. It didn't care about your appearance, how you spoke, who you dated, or whether you wore designer or fake. On the days where she wore sunglasses to hide herself from the world, it made no difference. Either way, this city wouldn't notice. Her fondness for Manchester's take-me-or-leave-me attitude and the daily evidence it offered that everyone's life got messy made her question, in recent months, why she wrote high-octane stories about the rich and famous, set in glamorous clinical cities. Alex had visited the Northern Quarter many times over the years, for coffees in her teens, drinks in her 20s with friends who had faded away after she got married. She hadn't been there much at all in her 30s. Her ex-husband preferred branded restaurants. Then, with what happened to Mum, followed by the whirlwind of becoming an author, Alex probably hadn't walked through the area for at least 10 years, preferring to take dates to fancy restaurants and cocktail bars, or whisk them down to London for the night, first class all the way. She came to Lever Street and turned left. Walking along, she passed a bookshop, minus the usual urge to slip in and move her books to the front. Instead, she forged ahead and arrived in Stevenson Square. Down the middle, people chatted and laughed, sitting on rows of wooden tables with benches, belonging to the bars and pubs either side. From a distance, it would have been a street party. She stood to admire a wall of street art. Hope had explained that the cafe was the first building on the left when you reached the square. With typical Mancunian irreverence, rain spat onto the ground as she made her way over. It was a 3-story building with shabby brickwork, yet the outside was painted in bright primary colours, with a green windowsill and a blue door. Unlike the other places serving drink and food, there were no tables outside. It stood next to a shop selling candles and crystals. She was about to read the cafe's name when her phone buzzed. A text from Hope. "You need to know that the cafe is—" Alex rolled her eyes and, without reading the rest of the text, put her phone away. She squinted through the window. In the near left-hand side corner stood a tall, tropical plant. If Alex hurried in, she could hide her case by the wall, under the glossy green leaves. The best way to get the sum of this place would be to go under cover. She pushed open the door. Customers carried on talking, apart from someone who blew a loud, wet raspberry in Alex's direction. Chapter 3. With customers and staff deep in conversation, Alex took in her surroundings, unable to spot the culprit. A coffee machine gurgled as she surveyed the room's circular tables. Covered in plastic yellow cloth, they resembled a troupe of twirling, full-skirted ballroom dancers. Bold murals brightened the walls, like the one of Manchester's town hall set against a cloudless sky, with a red telephone box in the foreground. Smaller ones were of a bowl of fruit, a pile of muffins, and a rural scene with cows and sheep, set in the Peak District perhaps. On the right-hand wall, the jukebox played "You Make Me Feel So Young" by Frank Sinatra. Above it, in large print, was a list of instructions on how to select a track. Ahead of Alex was a counter with a glass front, keeping germs away from cakes that looked robust enough to protect themselves. A story's setting could feel like one of the characters if it had a strong sense of uniqueness, but nothing in this building caught Alex's attention apart from the bright colours. The till was to the left, with a charity collection tin by its side. At the back, to the right of a coffee machine, was a silver hatch, behind which was the kitchen. To the right of that was a corridor leading to the kitchen and a flight of stairs, above which was a sign marked "Private." They must lead to Hope's flat. The only feature that stood out as different was the back wall of the cafe, in front of the stairs. Photos of the staff with customers covered it, yet none of them were famous. How boring. Time turned back 32 years to Alex's first day at high school, sitting in the canteen not knowing anyone. Alex often forgot how she was lucky as an author, working from home without having to accommodate the instructions or needs of any other person. Oh, she had her editor, agent, marketing team, but at a distance. On a daily basis, she didn't have to be near their coughs or sneezes, force a laugh at their unfunny jokes, or tolerate them interrupting a brainstorming daydream. As for being told what to do, Miranda was firm and honest to a fault, but Alex respected that. It made a change from her publisher's always look on the bright side bullshit. Being told to remove a plot twist or ramp up the emotion was different from receiving orders to clean the toilets or pander to rude customers. Her stomach contracted, not due to hunger. Why on earth had she agreed to work for 5 weeks with the public? A man with a white comb-over darted forward. "Welcome," he said, and gave a little bow. "Someone will be with you shortly." He showed her to the nearest table. Alex ignored him and went to the one by the plant. She stood her case upright and hid it behind the foliage. Her seat was a couple of tables behind a woman in her late 50s with a curly blow-dry. Opposite her was a striking member of staff, a little older, with vibrantly dyed ginger hair feathered around her round face. Her arms were crossed in between generous folds of stomach and bosom, as if she used to be 6 feet tall, but someone had pushed her head and feet closer together. She wore a red apron, like the man who'd shown her to her seat. He was now talking to a bunch of customers with American accents. He tilted his head and hung on their every word, hips swaying in time to the music. With his white comb-over, pointed nose and eyes magnified by thick glasses, he had a barn owl aspect about him. Alex's mum regaled her once with facts about barn owls and how they didn't hoot and have lopsided ears. Once retired, her mum became heavily involved with a local bird charity and was kept especially busy in the spring, a time when well-meaning members of the public would turn up with fledglings they'd come across hopping on the ground. Unfortunately, they'd interrupted an important part of the baby bird's development on their journey to independence. Their parents would have still been nearby, still keeping an eye and feeding them. Her mum admired Bird's parenting skills and had adopted the same mentality, encouraging Alex to spread her human wings, unlike Dad, who had been very much against his 18-year-old daughter going interrailing. Alex gazed at the Peak District mural, picturing her mum, rucksack on her back, binoculars to hand, searching for a shady spot to eat egg and cress sandwiches. She and Alex often used to go rambling together. Carrying a notebook and pencil, how old school, the squashed-looking server with ginger hair came over. "Good afternoon," she said, as if she used a practiced telephone voice, cat-eye glasses hanging on a strap around her neck, ruches of good humour around her eyes. "How are you today?" "It's morning, actually, which means numerous cups of coffee." This server needed to pay more attention. "But I haven't browsed the menu yet. Could you come back in a few minutes?" "Lovely hair colour, if a little harsh against your pale skin. Do you dye it yourself?" "Thank you, and no." That was a little rude. "Me neither. I used to. My sister does it now, and if you could give me a little while longer." Alex picked up the menu as her stomach rumbled. Breakfast was served until 11:30. She was just in time. Having chosen a dish, she studied the room again. So much for a quirky Northern Quarter vibe. This place couldn't be further from the sophisticated cafes she created in her novels. Her latest release had featured one called Roast Diamonds that served coffee containing crushed crystals. She was about to choose her breakfast when a man caught her attention, whistling indiscriminately, a pen behind his ear, his hair the colour of salted caramel, a flavour she considered highly overrated. He'd stood with his back to her in the far left corner, but now turned around to reveal behind him a large silver cage attached to a stand. Inside, a parrot, with white panda eyes and ruffled grey feathers, swung to and fro on a wooden bar. The bird gnawed the swing's chain with its hooked black beak. Was a pet in a cafe even legal? She took out her phone. It couldn't be sanitary. Yet a brief search informed her that no rules had been broken, as long as the pet couldn't access the food preparation area. Her mum would have loved to keep a bird, and dreamt of building a large aviary in the back garden. However, give Dad latex, rubber, aspartame, anything chemical, no problem, but he'd need mouth-to-mouth if you touched him with feathers, fur or pollen. Or so he said. In Alex's opinion, he was more allergic to Mum giving attention to anything but him. The parrot tossed an empty peanut shell onto the floor as her server with ginger hair appeared again and put down a frothy cappuccino. Alex frowned. "I haven't ordered a drink yet, nor have I drunk cow's milk for 3 years. Oh, sorry, must have got the wrong table." She surveyed the room, then took the mug to a pensioner by the other window and stopped for a chat, laughing heartily within a few minutes, or rather emitting a series of wheezes that sounded like an accordion finding it hard to produce music. Sloppy service. A resident parrot. What kind of cafe was this? Hope's tearful face popped into Alex's mind. It was one she was going to have to work in for the imminent future, and it wouldn't do to fall out with a colleague on her first day. She mustn't get sacked for Hope's sake. With a regal manner, Alex waved her hand for the server to come back. "Fresh fruit porridge, please, hold the honey, and espresso," she articulated, as if the woman needed to lip-read. "Goldilocks and the 3 Bears was one of my favourite stories when I was little," the server said. She took off her cat-eye glasses, distracted from her notepad for a moment. "I used to ask Mum to make me 3 plates of porridge." She was a talker. Alex wasn't used to this. Writing was mostly a solitary profession where she could choose when to answer a phone call, an email or a social media message. Face-to-face, it was far harder to control a conversation. The server scribbled on her pad before heading back to the hatch. Once there, she spoke to the young woman at the till, who had short hair with green streaks, a pixie cut they used to call it, pierced eyebrows, and she wore dungarees and a checked shirt rolled up to the elbows. Alex flinched as a loud squawk resounded across the room. "He's very friendly," said Barn Owl Man on his way to the counter. "Never nipped anyone." "As long as you don't ask him the obvious question," said the man with the pen behind his ear. He'd come over. A name badge said manager. That had to be Tom. Hope was right. He did have chocolate eyes. Miranda would gag when she talked about manuscripts in her slush pile where authors compared characters' physical features to food or drink. However, as Alex studied his thick hair cut above the ears, all one length and brushed to the left, salted caramel filled her mind again. His hair wasn't in a man bun, and he wasn't in chino shorts, but a floral shirt hung over ankle-grazer jeans and boat shoes with odd socks. There was a boyish air about him that she found irritating in a middle-aged man. "Hi," he said, and gazed into her face, holding out his hand. "Hi." "Leave me alone. I'm not at my best before at least my 3rd coffee." Alex averted her gaze. It took more effort than she'd expected. Reluctantly leaving the more stylish surroundings of Instagram, she slid her hand into his. He made a comment about the weather. The server came over with Alex's espresso. Her name badge said Reenie. Alex took a sip. Not bad. Slowly, Reenie came back carrying a red plate as if the food were a highly important telegram. She lowered it onto the yellow tablecloth, and Alex wrinkled her nose with the sense of nausea that she'd suffered from lately. On the plate lay a perfect circle of egg and neat runways of bacon. "I ordered fruit and porridge, not a cardiac arrest," Alex said in an abrupt tone. The parrot squawked again. "Is very friendly," called Barn Owl Man's voice from across the room. "Never nipped anyone." Alex got to her feet and glowered at the cage, the staff and the manager too. "Why is bad service a joke here?" she asked. "You don't know what this cafe is called?" asked Tom. Oh, as it turned out, she didn't. Alex had always cut Hope short when she tried to give any details, and had simply focused on the directions to get to the building. Then she'd been distracted by her phone outside, just as she was going to read its name.